every anger would say that this calculus on one end has love, peace, security. The beauty, the glorious part about human nature, your total potential. And on the other end, it has anger and fear. And I'll tell you what I've learned over the years, and this works in English. Anger, a nasty, getting even response. Fear, for every anger response, there is a nasty, getting even response. I'm going to tell you this. You don't get angry unless you're threatened. You may not think so, but you're afraid of something when you get angry. Somebody cuts you off, 5 o'clock traffic, they just cut it. There is a nasty, getting even response. I'm going to tell you in front of you, what happened? You're angry? Why? You got to slow down and you're going to be off a middle of a second and getting home? Why? Because he stole something from you, didn't he? He took my place. And they can't do that, can they? Well, why? Because it's wrong. And I'm afraid if I let somebody do it, I'll let everybody do it. See, there's no such thing as anger without fear, period. On that side, I have all the negative stuff that you can see that humans have done to humans over generations and generations and time immemorial. All right. On the other side, I have the highest potential that resides in the human condition. Along this calculus, then, we have to recognize that sitting in the center is our desire to avoid rejection and our survival mechanisms, our drives. They make up the model that resides in the human condition. Along the model of our mind, and if you don't believe that the greatest motivation you have subconsciously is to avoid rejection, you haven't really looked at yourself, because we all need to be loved. And you may as well understand that. We all need arousal and we all need to be loved. That is the human condition. Being rejected, whether it's how the boss looks at me and I sense rejection, something my mate says to me, that hurts. That's painful. What's more, it's threatening. And this is how. We have two kinds of stimuli that trigger these responses. One we can call imaginary threats. What's an imaginary threat? Hey, the guy that cut me off in 5 o'clock traffic is not a real threat, is it? The way my boss looks at me, that's not a real threat, is it? I make it a real threat. I make it seem like a real threat. But is it a saber-toothed tiger? A real threat? Is it a 357 at my head? Should fight, flight, anxiety, depression be set off by those synthetic stimuli? Well, the answer is no, but it is. It is in every one of us. There are two ways to be tied up in the world. Somebody can physically bind me. I'm tied up. I can attach a string to this microphone and refuse to pull it hard enough to break the string or to let go of it and walk away. If I have a belief that is a string and I'm holding on to it, it's my little chicken yard belief, I'm tied up. I promised you, but I was going to tell you the most important part of today, something that will change your life if you're willing to do it. Something that will add longevity and it will add health, and that's guaranteed. How did the inmate population tie themselves up? After all these psychometrics I told you about, we interviewed them. And you know what I heard from them over and over and over and over again? I mean, it could be summarized this way. Hey, my daddy was an alcoholic. My mommy was a prostitute. The neighbor boy hung heroin on me when I was 12 years old. Oh, but for the grace of God, there go you. And you know, almost all of that was nonsense. What were they doing? They were blaming where they were on somebody else. Not my fault. What is this thread? It's blame. Anyone that doesn't have someone or something they blame in their life is probably ready to start walking on water. Blame. It's the most debilitating thing you can do. Why? Because if you blame, you disenfranchised yourself. It's not my fault. What's that mean? I don't have to do anything about it, man. You do it for me. You change. It's not me. I'm not responsible. Isn't that what blame does? Blame literally executes your free will. Krishnamurti, the great philosopher, J. Krishnamurti, passed away recently in Ohio. I guess recently, I'm getting old. 12 years ago, 15 years ago, said this: choice is an illusion that grows out of confusion. If I know clearly what to do, there is no choice. Now think of it this way. If I have choices, any of them that I might make, but I have excluded myself from making them by just simply saying it's not my fault, it's yours, what value is free will? What value is choice? Blame is the most important thing for you to just eradicate from your life. Blame comes in aggregates. Shame, guilt, they all tie us up in one way or another. And it's not that shame is necessarily bad, because maybe there are things that are shameful that each of us have done. But we have to learn to let go of that, not bring it along with us. We have to learn to forgive. You remember our inmate population? If I'm going to interrupt their recidivity, what have I got to do? I got to stop them from displacing responsibility. They have to begin to take responsibility themselves. Make the choices themselves. How can I do that? 3 magic messages that we have tested in so many domains, ranging from like attention deficit hyperactive disorder to dart throwing, athletic performance. I forgive myself. I forgive all others. I am forgiven. When I went to the Department of Corrections, people involved and said, you know, hey, this is what we want to put on this program. Man, are you kidding? I forgive. Suddenly it was, oh, I don't know. They were suspicious. And isn't that grace? Isn't that religious? Isn't that spiritual? Can we do something more psychological? There's nothing more psychological that you can do. 20 years ago, this may have been pioneering. It's not pioneering today. You can't pick up a journal anywhere that doesn't have an article on the power of forgiveness. Those 3 messages literally liberate you. Well, if they liberate me, what does that afford me? And before we go on to this, I'm once again going to tell you a story. Choices. So imagine walking down the street in New York City. Those of you who visited New York, the Big Apple, the high-rise condos, boy, these are $1.5 million, $2 million condos before the real estate boom. And I'm walking along, kind of looking, skyline, and from a 3rd-floor balcony, flower pot falls. Bam! Hits me in the head. Falls to the ground, pot breaks, flower falls out. I have some choices. I bet you can all think of this one. We sue this guy. He's got a lot of bucks. Look at the place he lives in. I'll claim, concussion. Get my digital little portfolio out and call my attorney right now. Do that. Oh, I wanted to be John Wayne. I'm going to take this broken flower pot and put it you know where. But I get to the door, and I see this guy as a linebacker for the Chicago Bears. Excuse me? I can be metaphysical. Thank you. That probably brought some enlightenment to me. What else can I do? What could I do that would turn this situation into thank you, gratitude situation? Wow, what if I were to take that flower, go over to the corner florist, have it repotted, Take the pot back to the owner. It fell off your balcony. Pot was broke. Wanted to return it to you, repotted. Of all the things I could have done, which one would have made me feel the best? You're right. Last one. My body would have been filled with all those good, warm, fuzzy chemicals. I would have had a moment of ah. I had a great laugh looking at the expression on the person's face. That would have been my best, wouldn't it? How many of us would think of that? Choices. When we undo blame, guilt, shame, we have the ability to uncover a new self. We suddenly have a whole new horizon, a whole new vista of choices. And those choices manifest our free will. The confusion, anger, fear disappears, goes away. Now to digress, we have that puzzle in place. Let's finish the technology puzzle. Remember, we're assembling puzzles. Turns out to be shadowing technology. I didn't think it was all that revolutionary. All my colleagues said, wow, nobody's ever done this, you ought to patent it. Well, I did. But I also give it away to therapists. I tell therapists how to do it, etc., because there's an advantage to working one-on-one with clients. And I'm going to tell you what we do. What is shadowing? It's not a buried message. What is a buried message? In the United States, if you advertise something, say something will do something, make certain claims, you better be able to support them. Because otherwise, we're going to have some government agency, they're going to come in and they're going to say, show me. And they're going to fine, shut you down, and do other things if you can't show them. Well, there was a company, remember these companies that made programs that I couldn't find anything on? They got in some trouble in Texas, the Attorney General's office in the state of Texas, and asked this company to put up or shut up, and they contacted me because I'm supposed to be this guru, and said, you know, can you help us in this case? First thing I asked him was, well, how did you create your programs? Well, we'll have an audio engineer send you the details. Oh, finally, the secret recipe to Coca-Cola. And in come the details. The audio engineer certifies that he mixed the affirmations 40 dB beneath the primary carrier. Okay, we're not going to go into audio acoustics. I'm just going to explain it this way. 40 dB beneath waves or music. What is that? The theoretical limit to a ghetto blaster is 30 dB. Do you get that? It can only get out 30 dB. What's 40 dB? It's what's going on at the symphony concert that's taking place, where do you want it to be? Singapore right this minute? And how it's affecting us. Don't you hear it? Isn't it beautiful? That's what it is. It's invisible. It's not real. I mean, in order for a stimulus to be a stimulus, it must meet a certain threshold. And in an audio stimulus, it must trigger a neuron. If it's insufficient to do that, it simply doesn't exist. Understand that. When I started my research, designing these things, the first thing I took into consideration is something known as hemispheric laterality. That's the right brain and the left brain. We developed what we call the mirror imaging paradigm, and it basically works like this. First of all, our left hemisphere for us right-handers is typically the linear logical center of our brain. It processes language, it thinks mathematically, it is the logic center. Our right hemisphere, on the other hand, just about everybody gives subconscious activities to, but it is spatial, it is oriented artistically, it is so overgeneralized that I want to be careful here. Where I come from, if you see a left-hander, you might jump to the conclusion that they're going to be a musician. Not necessarily so. But the body is cross-wired. And if we're right-handed, that typically demonstrates that we're very left-brained. And things that are linear, we're going to favor and be predisposed to. If we're left-handed, that means we're right-brained, and that typically means music and art and things like that. But the brain is amazingly redundant. And in its redundancy, that is too much of a simplification. There are left-handers that are brilliant mathematicians and vice versa, right-handers that are brilliant artists. But we tend to generally think of it as lateralized by speciality. You think of it this way. If you were an athlete and I took two balls, I held them so far apart and I threw them to you, and I said catch them, and you tried to look them both into your hand, you would drop them. You cannot do that. You simply cannot do that. But if you take your eyes off them, you can pick them up pretty easy. The brain specializes, and in its specialization, one hemisphere has clearly been shown to specialize more in linear, logical, analytical, and the other more in the spatial and the artistic. So I don't want you to go away thinking it's either or, even though there's a lot of literature that says there is. You remember I told you about the lie detection test? I ran the tape backwards. The guy said, no, I didn't take the missing money. And backwards it said, liar. Remember that? Now, if there's anything controversial, really controversial, I'm going to discuss with you today, that's this next area. Carl Pribram said the brain's holographic. Said so 30 years ago. Brilliant scientist, Stanford University. Boy, Carl Pribram says so. I paid attention. Pribram, however, didn't. He kind of went away because it wasn't real popular, and he is a very well thought of professor. But not everybody went away. They took his idea and they started doing a lot of research. What do you mean holographic? The brain's holographic. Well, you know, when I went to school, they taught us that memory was encoded in so-called engrams and egrams. That is, look, you know, we had special compartments in the head. I'll bet that looks funny. Special compartments in the head where we just stored all our information. Utilizing rats, we anatomically have removed different parts of the brain from maze-bright rats, rats that run a maze very quickly, until there's no place left for memory to be. And they still run the maze. You say, well, how's that possible? If it's encoded here and we remove the section, how's that possible? The hippocampus is gone, hypothalamus is gone, neocortex is gone, the frontal lobe is gone. Where is this memory? Well, according to Carl Pribram, it's holographically stored across the entire brain. And according to modern research, that pretty well stands as that's how the brain encodes information. You can take engrams and egrams and throw them away. That's a fact. The brain mirrors information. This mirror processing information gives rise to the controversial subject I mentioned earlier. Do we learn language in reverse and then mirror it to the other hemisphere? You know, the universe is kind. At the time I'm working on this, young lady, dyslexic, doing what all young people do. Not all, but a vast majority. She's writing 5s and S's backwards. How many of you have seen that in your own children? Instead of this, it's this. Instead of this, it's this. It's very, very common. They typically outgrow it. It's not dyslexia in a clinical sense. Well, what are they doing? What's going on that causes this backwards writing? Well, I theorized that Pribram was right, and the brain must be mirroring information. If it mirrors information, it would be creating a holograph, interfering patterns. Those interfering light patterns would cause the pig to appear to be on top. There are two mirrors. They're refracting light. The refraction of that light takes this little tiny pig that's down in the middle and stands it up. It's no longer in there. It's right here, right on the top. But it really isn't. It's a holograph. That's where the memory is going. But then if that's the instance, does that explain masking, shadow tasking? That was my next question. You see, if Pribram was right, that could be the mechanism behind this kind of tasking. The picture. You see what he's doing up there? What's in his left hemisphere is in his right visual field. What's in his right hemisphere is in his left visual field. He is mirroring that information. When we do shadow listening tasks, the top one illustrates a well-known study that's been replicated many, many times, where we essentially take two stories. We tell one story to this ear, we tell another story to this ear, and the brain makes up one story. It just doesn't hear all the words. It makes up one story. The volume is exactly the same. We send random numbers, say, to the right ear. To the left ear, we might tell a story like, I was walking down the street one day. Then we shift and we start telling random numbers, 17, 22, 19. And in this ear, landed on my shoulder and gave me a kiss. And then we ask you, what did you hear? I was walking down the street one day when a bird landed on my shoulder and gave me a kiss. I never heard the numbers. This is called shadow tasking. If the mind is mirroring information, and if the hemispheres are specialized, does that explain why I make one story, or I don't hear the numbers, I only put one story together? To me, the answer is yes. A lot of the literature is in total agreement. A friend of mine says, Eldon, one day you're going to win the Nobel Prize. A dozen others say, Eldon, I think you're over the deep end. We'll get to the proof. Remember, I'm the pragmatist. Does it work? If I'm right, then we have two hemispheres mirroring. You see the word up there, cat? Our dominant left brain has to learn to turn that word into the forward cat, or the S into the forward S, the 5 into the forward 5. We would process information that way. Our visual center, our spatial center, two different images. I'm processing a word. The word may be beautiful, but I'm also processing the picture, beautiful. One of my favorite little sayings to impress you with beautiful, whenever you see a beautiful woman, and for women maybe this is a handsome man, you know there's a God. But there is a visual image attached to every word that we have. If I tell you there is a griffin, and a griffin is part eagle and part lion. Head of a lion, body, wings of an eagle. You have a picture, do you not? And then we're taught that nouns are the names of person, places, and things, even if they're not, because there's really no such thing as a griffin. And as Korzybski points out, we begin to think in these symbols. And in the process of thinking in these symbols, we begin to make certain assumptions. And those assumptions, well, nouns are the names of person, places, and things. So, you know, electricity. Yeah, I know what electricity is. I'll tell you what, no scientist knows what electricity is. They can't give you an adequate definition. But we can make it, and we can use it. But you probably haven't ever stopped to say, what is it really? If we pursue that, we essentially have a holographic mind, and that means that the brain often does see things that are not there, will confabulate them, and that the brain often fails to see what's there. Well, the proof is in the pudding. I want you to look at that disc spinning up there right now. I want you to concentrate on that disc for a minute, because you now need to see for yourself. Focus on the disc. Allow your concentration, all of your mind, to just be drawn to the center of the disc. Focus totally, wholly, solely on the disc for a minute. This will only take a minute. And keep your eyes fixated on the disc. You are seeing reality, a spinning disc. Allow it to pull you in, allow it to push you out. But focus totally on the disc. For a moment, nothing matters but what you see or don't see in that disc. Some people report seeing a little star in the center of that disc. Other people see it as a spider web or a spider. What is it you see? But stay focused on the disc. In a moment, I'm going to change this slide to a picture. And I want you to just tell me what you see in the picture. Now take a look at that picture. Is it alive? Are things moving out of it at you? Does everybody see that? But this is just a plain picture. The mind confabulates all the time for a visual range we literally don't see. The hemispheres add it together. And when we confuse that and just displace it, it takes a moment for the brain to come back. So was that picture a solid or was it not a solid? My perception normally tells me that's just a picture. But was it that when you first switched? Or did you see the stars coming right out at you? What we do and don't perceive, illusions. This is a photograph we use in illusions. If you look at this photograph right up in the corner where I showed you, there was a glare on my glasses. The photographer wanted to take the glare out, so he just simply put a little background in, the same background that was behind me. Well, that was great, except it chunked out a hunk of my face. When I was choosing the photographs, everybody looking at them, they liked this photograph. My wife said, "Are you kidding? Look, part of your face is missing." Trust my wife. Nobody else saw that. So we decided I can use this photograph when I'm discussing illusions because nobody sees it. Let's look at some more. This is a popular illusion. How many of you see gears moving? This is a stream that's not a stream. Look at it a minute. See motion? That circle is drawn perfectly. It's not disfigured. The circle in the middle of the first that has the smaller outer is the same diameter as the circle in the middle of those with a larger diameter. These are very common illusions. They're here to demonstrate to you how you see and don't see. Those lines are really parallel. They're perfect. They're not wavy. There are only white circles in the center of that. There are no red circles, no black circles. Those vertical lines are the same length. So in summary, we can say the right brain is spatial, emotional, and artistic. The left brain, analytical, linear, and logical. They have different primary tasks. Because of their specialization, those tasks can be redundant, but they also give rise to creating certain types of inhibitions, illusions, failure to see, and seeing what really isn't there. Stroop's test, this next test, is a good tell on hemispheric speciality. This is what I want you to do. I want you to read the color by saying the color of every word, left to right, top to bottom. See how fast you can do it. You ready? Go. Color. Green, red. Come on, folks, the color. Not the word. Fast now. Have fun with that one, can't you? One brain wants to say yellow. The other brain wants to say, that's green. Try to get that non-dominant to go green, red, blue, yellow. Fun one, huh? Now do you understand what I mean about interfering with each other? Does everybody see the cat? You want to tell me how the A is any different than the H? We call that context perception. You're expecting it. I'm out at the prison. I'm explaining subliminal communication. We're dividing them into three groups when we run our study: the control, the placebo, the experimental. And by the way, that study turned out to not only lower hostility and aggression rates, but it interrupted recidivity rates. I'm at the prison. I've got these inmates, and I'm trying to explain subliminal communication. I took with me an ad so I could show them what it was. It was the most successful